Hey guys, I'm going to do a video on understanding relays. If you look here, this is a simple circuit for power and fog lights. The reason why I'm going to do this is because a lot of people I think get confused. And I watched another video where the guy was talking about voltage drops, and you don't need to know about voltage drops in a relay. All you need to know is, one, the voltage of your vehicle, the voltage of the appliance, in this case it's fog lights, and the amperage that they're going to be drawing. That's all you need to know. You really don't need to know anything other than that. So let's go ahead and get into this. When you're talking relays, let me get this page going. When you're talking relays, you need to know the terminology. And the first thing that you need to understand is normal open, normal close. If you know what open means and you know what close means in a circuit, then you're all set. But if you don't know what normal means, normal is the normal state without the coil being energized or unswitched. So this is how you do normal open, normal close, and it's the easiest way to remember this is if you're in your bedroom and you're able to draw a constant line around your room with the door closed. You can complete that circuit from one side of the door to the other side of the door. That would be normal close. Most relays, that's going to be 87A. This means that it's a completed circuit. You can energize the circuit, and power always flows through the circuit. Okay. Now, normal open would be you're doing the same thing, but if you open the door, you can't jump power from here to here. It's not going to happen. So basically, you've cut the circuit. So normal open is circuit incomplete. Power is waiting to go through. So that's how you look at normal open, normal close. I hope that's a pretty simple way of describing it to you guys. But you need to know that in order to wire a relay. And the only reason why is because if you wire something wrong, you could turn it on when it's not supposed to be on. Or you could burn something up because you have it on when something else is on. So it's important to understand normal open, normal close. And if you've noticed, I put 87 and 87A underneath each one. It's because on a standard 5-pin automotive relay, 87 is always open, 87A is always closed. So now let's get into the two different types of relays. And the reason why I'm showing you both relays is because really they both work the same way, and really they both have 4 of the same pins. It's just the 5-pin has an extra pin. So if you look in the little diagram I made here, you'll see that the way the 4 pins are laid out here, they're laid out the same way they are in the number 5-pin switch relay, but they have an extra pin, 87A. Most relay bases have this pin already in it. Well, the pin's not in the base, but it's already got the knockout for that pin, which means most applications, if you pull out the relay, you may see that it's a 5-pin relay base with a 4-pin in it, especially on something like fog lights. The reason why you would use a 5-pin, perfect example for me would be talking about an evaporator motor where it's got a low and a high speed. Basically, when you energize the circuit but you don't energize the coil, basically you're running low speed. And then when you activate the coil and you pull in 87, then you're running high speed. And that would be why you're using a 5-pin relay. It is basically you're switching speeds between on a motor. Something like this is a little more simple, where all you're really doing is activating, set appliance. It only needs to turn on and off. So it's an I/O function. That's really all you're using this for. The other thing you could be using this for is 30 and 87. Because you have the higher amperage load here, you could be using this as a switch and then use this as an actual switch to do, we'll say you got, I don't know, light bar on the top of the truck, a light bar in the in your bumper, and then you know, your two little off-road lights on each corner of the bumper. So say you decided you wanted all of those wired off of a separate circuit, but you wanted one switch to turn it all on, you could use one relay as a way to turn each one on, because you can put more power through here. Granted, you're only going to be putting maybe 1.5 to 3 amps through this relay. It still makes a pretty damn good switch, and you only needed to use one coil to really turn everything on, which means that you only had one switch to turn everything on. And that's really all you really need. But some people are going to be like, no. You need to turn them all on separate. If they're off-road lights, you want them all on together. You can turn them all on together. That's the way I look at it. So this is the difference between a 4-pin and a 5-pin. Now, rather than showing you the 4-pin and 5-pin separate as far as the way it hooks up, I'm just going to show you the 5-pin. Okay, 86 is always a switched power source. This always has a fuse on it. So if we go back to the first page, and you're looking at 86, you'll notice it comes off of the 3 amp fuse, goes over to the switch, goes through the switch up to number 86 on the relay. The other side of that relay is 85. That goes directly to ground. 85 is ground. Now, on the actual side that's power and whatever it is that you're using on it, in this case it's fog lights, you've got a 25 amp fuse right off the battery, and 12 volt positive battery connection goes to number 30 on the relay, and then the relay, the switch goes to nothing. So if you were using a 5-pin in place of that, it would be going to 87A, which you just wouldn't have a wire off of. Okay, so you can use a 5-pin and a 4-pin in the same spot as long as the functions are the same. That's why it's important to know normal open, normal close. So, okay. Now, in the 4-pin, 87 is what you're switching. So 87 is an appliance, 87A is an appliance. These are both power wires. The reason why these are power wires is because when this switches to either circuit, you've got power running through each circuit. So you do not want to skimp on your wire. If you got 14 gauge on this side, you have 14 gauge on this side. If you got 10 gauge on this side, you got 10 gauge on this side. It's just the way it is. Okay? So now let's get into the heart of the beast. This is the coil. The coil is an electromagnet. It's also the control circuit. It's the control circuit because, as you can see here, there's a switch. Okay? So now, there are two different types of coils, so we're going to go through that in a minute. And so you got power comes into the switch is open, so no power can come through. So 86 is what's hooked up to it, but there's still no power going through, so the switch is basically dead, so it's at its normal state. So now we're going to switch it on. So now you got power coming in, switch is closed, power goes through the coil becomes a magnet. So then power goes out of the coil to ground, or it depends on, you know, it might be in series with another circuit. But generally speaking, it needs to see ground somewhere so that it can pull in. This is the energized state, and this is basically how a coil works. Now on a suppressed coil, you got power comes in, switch is closed, power goes into 86, you've got a diode here. This diode is circuit protection. Power can only flow in one direction. Okay? So that's why they do this. You'll see this when the relay is on a board with a bunch of other relays. So like say it's an actual circuit board. If you've ever worked with Micromax on any type of vehicle or something like that, AC, you'll see that there's a lot of suppressed relays in there. That's because it's on a board, so they don't want it to backfeed power and blow something up. So power can only flow one way. This brings me to another little tidbit. Okay. Yes, on an unsuppressed coil, you can probably wire it back and forth. It doesn't really matter, yada, yada, yada. For diagnosing purposes, 86 is always power. 85 is always ground. The reason why is because any other relay that's on your vehicle is wired this way. So 86 is power, 85 is ground. What happens if you wire it backwards? The circuit may still work, or it may not work. Or you might overheat the coil and cause a fire, or blow out the relay. So really, what you want to do is you want to make sure that 86 is always power and 85 is always ground. All right, that's important on the coil side. All right, and don't forget, sometimes when you got a relay and you see that they got like a little diode coming off the little schematic they got of the relay, if you see a diode on there listed, it's suppressed. Okay, which means it has to be wired this way, otherwise it will not work, period. Okay, so this is how the relay works. So 12 volt ignition power comes in, here's your switch, it's open, now the coil is dead. You've got your 12 volt battery power, it's unswitched, it comes in on number 30, but it has nowhere to go, so power is waiting. So basically on a relay, even when the vehicle is off, depending on how this relay is actually wired, usually they're wired off the battery, so there's always power waiting here. Okay, so usually what ends up, when you have a problem with a relay, 30 is the first place to look. Am I getting power at number 30? The second place to look is, if I turn the switch on, am I getting power at 86? Remember what I said, they have to be wired right so you can diagnose it right. If you're getting power at both 30 and 86, are you getting ground at 85? If you're getting ground at 85 and you make a little jumper wire and jump 30 to 87, does the circuit turn on? If the circuit goes active, then maybe you got a problem in the coil. If the coil shows to be good, then maybe you got a problem here at the switch. So that's quick diagnosing 101. You need a multimeter for it. Don't ever take the multimeter lead and jam it in through the coating on the wire, because all you're doing is creating an access point for corrosion to destroy the wire, and then you'd be in a bad spot if it ends up being in a tight area, because then you'd have to run a new harness. Okay, so now we're going to go to switch to energized. Basically, a 12 volt ignition flows through the closed switch, through your coil. Your coil becomes energized, turns into a magnet, and power flows out to ground. Okay, 12 volt battery. Power flows through the closed switch. As you notice, I got a little arrow pointing down, because when this became magnetized, it pulled in. So now that you've pulled the circuit and you've closed the circuit, power can go out. So I'm hoping this is the easiest way for you guys to understand how relays work, and I hope this kind of gives you a little bit of understanding of how diagrams work. The guy that I watched that did a video on relays was talking about voltage drops, and if he's talking about voltage drops, he's doing you a disservice, because voltage drops are not caused by the wire you use. Voltage drops are caused by resistance. Resistance in a circuit can be a broken wire, a cut wire, corrosion, dirty connections. Alright, this is what you're looking for when you're talking about a voltage drop. This generally does not give you a voltage drop, and you don't use these because you're getting a voltage drop. You're using these because you're using a low amp load to switch a high amp product, a high amp appliance. All right, that's why you're using a relay. You might be using a relay to switch a bunch of different other relays so that you can turn a bunch of different other things on all at the same time that are all wired off of their own battery source. So it's important to understand that when you're matching your relays to your circuits. Now we'll come back here and look at, my original diagram. When you're matching a relay to its circuit, you got a 3 amp circuit here. This is a 12 volt circuit. Goes through 86, comes out 85. Notice I have a fuse here. Generally speaking, on this circuit here, you're probably going to be using 14 or 16 gauge wire. It's because it doesn't need to be a real fat wire. You're only pulling, even though I got a 3 amp fuse here, you're probably not even pulling a full amp. So as far as this goes, 14 to 16 gauge wire is perfectly fine. On this side though, we got 25 amps. And 25 amps, depending on the length of your run, if it's for fog lights, chances are your run's less than 10 feet. And then it goes to 30, it comes out 87, and then it's going to go down to your fog lights. So we're going to say that your run on this circuit is about 10 feet, give or take. And you got a 25 amp fuse. So if it can take 25 amps, you got about a 10-foot run, you're probably looking at between probably 14 and 12 gauge, because your run's not that long. And newer cars aren't that long to begin with, so it's not like you got a 1976 Lincoln Continental, where it's almost 30 feet long, and you got a wire running from the battery all the way up in the driver's corner box that's going to go all the way back to an amplifier in the rear of the car. That's 30 feet away, and you probably got about 38 to 40 feet of wire in between it. Then you got to go up gauge. So if it's supposed to be we'll say 6 gauge, you might have to drop it to 4 gauge to get the full amperage load back to whatever you're powering. That's when you're worrying about amperage. But amperage is really all you're matching on here, because this is a 12 volt system, so you obviously got to make sure it's a 12 volt relay. But other than that, most of these relays are standard 25 or 40 amp, and you can be switching anything from those. You can switch on this side, you can switch 6, 12, 24, 30, 36, or whatever your voltage is. It does not matter on this side. All that matters is your amperage. On this side, it matters what your voltage is. So if you're using 12 volts and this is a 12 volt relay, when they're saying 12 volt relay, this is the circuit that's 12 volts. I hope this makes a lot of sense to you guys. Take it easy.